2. Shakyamuni's encouragements to do good in daily life and aspire for birth in the Pure Land for the attainment of enlightenment. To counter the karmic effects of the evil acts described previously, one has two options: to do good and/or to aspire to be born in the Pure Land. Even without having the aspiration for birth in the Pure Land, people can still do good and change their karmic situation for the better. Also, the aspiration for birth in the Pure Land and the non-discriminative salvation offered by Amida does not mean one should not try to behave ethically towards others. As long as one is clearly aware that his or her salvation depends entirely on the power of Amida Buddha and abandons any idea of transferring his pitiful merits towards birth in the Pure Land, his efforts to lead a decent life and to do as much good as possible is not in contradiction with the primal vow. Thus, to try to lead a moral life and aspire for birth in the Pure Land can be followed at the same time by those who have faith in Amida. To do evil and wander here and there for egoistic goals and personal satisfaction is simply useless, as it does not lead to any long-lasting happiness. Shakyamuni Buddha said, quote, "Why do they not abandon all worldly involvements and strive, while they are strong and healthy, to pursue good and diligently seek deliverance from samsara? If they do, they will be able to attain infinite life. Why do they not seek the way? What is there in this world that should be longed for? What pleasure is there that ought to be sought after?" The Buddha said to Bodhisattva Maitreya and to devas and humans, "I have told you the truth about people of the world. Such being their mode of life, they are unable to enter the way. Therefore, you should think deeply and try to avoid various evil acts. Choose the good and diligently practice it. A life of addiction to desires or a life of pomp and vainglory cannot last long. All must pass. There is nothing you can really enjoy. Since you have encountered a Buddha in this world, you should assiduously practice the way. It is time for all to seek deliverance from the pains of birth, sickness, old age, and death. Outflows of depravity and defilement are everywhere, and there is nothing in which you can find true joy. You should resolutely do worthy deeds with propriety. Strive to do more good, control and purify yourselves. Wash away the mental defilements. Be sincere in word and deed, and allow no contradiction between what you think and what you do." End quote. Doing good even in an imperfect way and trying to abandon evil thoughts, words and deeds helps one to come closer to the true meaning of life, which is to seek liberation from the samsaric existence and be born in a form where it is easier to follow the various gates of the way of the Buddha. A life focused on attachments and desires without any genuine aspiration for enlightenment will make one unable to enter the way, both in this life and in the next, as he will be reborn in the lower realms where it is almost impossible to listen to and practice the Dharma. The infinite life of nirvana cannot be attained without first being born in a place where the Dharma is present, and without making efforts to listen deeply to it and practice it. And nobody can live in a place where he can have access to genuine Dharma without having previously done some good acts to deserve to be born as a human being, as the human realm is the most beneficial place for hearing and following any type of Dharma gate. Even if now they do not rely exclusively on Amida through the faith and Nembutsu of the primal vow, Buddhist disciples who do good deeds and accumulate good karma can advance through better and better conditions in the samsaric existence until finally they reach a point where they become more open to Amida, entrust to him and attain nirvana in his Pure Land. This is why Shakyamuni, although he devoted the larger sutra to explaining Amida's unconditional salvation, still encourages those without faith and not ready yet to entrust to Amida to try their best to lead a moral life. This is how we should read the passages in sections 31 to 40, where he mentions personal power efforts to purify themselves and advance to nirvana. However, as I said previously, The encouragement to do good and lead a moral life is not addressed only to those incapable of entrusting completely to Amida, but also to those who are stable in faith. It is extremely important to understand that Amida Dharma is not an instrument to justify blind passions nor institutionalize them as normal behavior. Indeed, in its saving activity, Amida Buddha makes no distinction between virtuous and non-virtuous people, but making no distinction out of great compassion between them, it does not mean that he supports or encourages evil. No Buddha, including Amida and Shakyamuni, have ever supported evil actions. Please do not confuse being saved as you are with the idea that all your actions are now worthy and good, or that you should not make any effort for good behavior. Instead of praising or justifying your blind passions, be ashamed of them and grateful to Amida's helping hand. As Shinran said, do not take a liking to poison because you have the antidote. That is, try your best to abandon evil actions even if you are saved by Amida. We, disciples of Amida and Shakyamuni, do not deny nor discourage anybody to try to observe precepts. We are not against precepts. We do not say that followers of our school should not try to observe precepts or to lead a moral life. Quote, you should not follow the urges of the passions, break the precepts, or fall behind others in the practice of the way. End quote. What we say is that we should not think that trying to observe precepts creates personal merits or adds something to the salvation of Amida. We are born in the Pure Land and become Buddhas only due to Amida's power, not to our own efforts in observing precepts or doing such and such practices. Thus, as a voluntary choice and not a requirement for birth in the Pure Land, try your best to live a moral life which can include not to hurt anybody directly or indirectly. Do not steal, do not engage in sexual misconduct, do not lie, do not drink intoxicants, do not eat meat, etc. But never relate this to your attainment of Buddhahood, which comes only through Amida Buddha's power. Your success or lack of success in voluntarily observing precepts have no connection with your enlightenment, so be relaxed in this matter. This is the difference between Amida Dharma or Jodo Shinshu and other Dharma gates. What a Jodo Shinshu follower does is to delete once and for all the words personal merit or personal virtue from his Buddhist vocabulary. These concepts may have some significance in other schools, but in Jodo Shinshu they have no significance at all. Neither Shinran Shonin nor any patriarch of our school ever said kill, steal, lie, cheat on your wife, etc., but rather they intended to say, even if you do not kill, do not steal, do not lie, do not cheat on your wife, etc., it doesn't mean that you're a good person capable of attaining Buddhahood by yourself. This should be very well understood. Really, who in his right mind can state that a person of faith should not try to follow these simple instructions of Shakyamuni? Quote, people of the world, parents and children, brothers and sisters, husbands and wives, and other family members and kinsmen should respect and love each other, refraining from hatred and envy. They should share things with others, not be greedy and miserly, always speak friendly words with a pleasing smile, and not hurt each other. End quote. Or that rulers should not act in accordance with these guidelines. Quote, rulers should abide by morality, reign with beneficence, and decree that everyone should maintain proper conduct, revere the sages, respect people of virtue, be benevolent and kind to others, and take care not to disregard the Buddha's teachings and admonitions. End quote. Also, even if it is said in the sacred text that in the last age of the Dharma, precepts no longer exist, this does not mean that we should kill and steal as we like. The expression there are no precepts means that people living in the last age of the Dharma are no longer capable of using precepts in order to advance to enlightenment. Thus, precepts are as good as non-existent for the ultimate goal of Buddhist practice. I repeat, precepts are as good as non-existent for the ultimate goal of Buddhist practice, which means the attainment of Buddhahood. But still, we can read in the sutras, including the larger sutra, about the precepts, so we cannot say they have been deleted from our written or collective memory. This is why the Buddha said, if you have doubts and are not clear about my teaching, ask me, the Buddha, about anything, and I shall explain it to you. Even if Shakyamuni is not with us anymore in visible form, we still have his teachings on various topics, including the precepts. As he himself said, the wisdom disclosed in the scriptures provides for all ways of life. It keeps essential principles together and clearly reveals the truth. So, to ask him is to read these sacred writings and see how the Buddhas want us to behave, think and talk. Thus, we should try to guide our lives by them as much as we can, but doing so no longer constitutes merit or a means to advance on the path to enlightenment, as in our case only Amida's power leads us there. This is because our capacities to truly observe the precepts, both in letter and spirit, are as little as non-existent. A good deed done here in this difficult samsaric environment is more than a good deed in the land of Amida, as the inhabitants of the Pure Land do good naturally, being already enlightened. Quote, if you strictly observe the precepts of abstinence with upright thought and mindfulness, even for a day and a night, the merit acquired will surpass that of practicing good in the land of Amateus for 100 years. The reason is that in Buddha land of effortless spontaneity, all the inhabitants do good without committing even a hair's breadth of evil. End quote. In other worlds too, beings already enjoy better karmic conditions, and so few do evil, and most of them are naturally inclined to be virtuous. So to do good, even for a short while in our world, produces more good karma than in their world. Quote, if in this world you do good for 10 days and nights, the merit acquired will surpass that of practicing good in the Buddha lands of other directions for 1,000 years. The reason is that in the Buddha lands of other directions many practice good and very few commit evil. These are lands where everything is naturally provided as a result of one's merit and virtue, that is, accumulated in previous lives. And so, no evil is done. But in this world much evil is committed and few are provided for naturally. People must work hard to get what they want. Since they intend to deceive each other, their minds are troubled, their bodies are exhausted, and they drink bitterness and eat hardship. In this way, they are too much preoccupied with their toil to have time for rest. End quote. Also, when a Buddha is present in human form, the conditions in which people live automatically improve due to his enlightened influence and blessings, so it is a lot easier to practice in those conditions. Quote, wherever the Buddha comes to stay, there is no state, town, or village that is not blessed by his virtues. The whole country reposes in peace and harmony. The sun and moon shine with pure brilliance. Wind arises and rain falls at the right time. There is no calamity or epidemic, and so the country becomes wealthy and its people enjoy peace. Soldiers and weapons become useless, and people esteem virtue, practice benevolence, and diligently cultivate courteous modesty. End quote. However, who is actually capable of constantly practicing virtue and strictly following precepts in this decadent age, so far from Shakyamuni's time? Jodo Shinshu states that the minds and environment of beings living in this age, distant from the physical presence of Shakyamuni, are so much perverted that they cannot advance to Buddhahood by themselves, using various methods of self-improving until one day purity, perfect wisdom, and perfect compassion is achieved. Shakyamuni himself ended his discourse, sections 31 to 41, on the karmic situation of beings who have no aspiration for enlightenment, and his encouragement to do good, by acknowledging that although his presence in this world enabled everyone to easily follow a virtuous life, abandon evil, and attain nirvana, the spiritual capacities of beings will gradually diminish after he leaves his physical body. Quote, my concern for you, devas and humans, is greater than the care of parents for their children. I have become a Buddha in this world, destroyed the 5 evils, removed the 5 sufferings, and extinguished the 5 burnings. I have countered evil with good, eradicated the suffering of birth and death, and enabled people to acquire the 5 virtues and attain the peace of unconditioned nirvana. But after I have departed from this world, my teaching will gradually decline, and people will fall prey to flattery and deceit and commit various evils again, resulting in the recurrence of the 5 sufferings and the 5 burnings. As time goes on, their sufferings will intensify. End quote. It is infinitely easy to have right conduct and attain Buddhahood in a single lifetime when you are in the physical presence and powerful sphere of influence of Shakyamuni himself, and another to live 2,500 years since he left his human body. This is why we, disciples of Amidaji, following the example of Shakyamuni in the above passage, no longer believe in the spiritual capacities of unenlightened beings. This is also why we do not link precepts with attaining Buddhahood. Everything unenlightened beings do in the three ways of action is poisoned by ignorance and egoism, so they cannot be called pure or good actions useful for attaining perfect nirvana. Attachment to our so-called goodness is just another illusion among the many that we inherit from the distant past. That being said, I ask those who read this sutra and entrust to Amida to please do not misunderstand the teaching of our school. Amidaji is not an encouragement to immorality, irresponsibility, or laziness. Followers of this Dharma gate may try their best to lead a life based on non-harming Buddhist principles explained in the precepts. Amidaji states that enlightenment comes through Amida Buddha and is not gained by the actions of unenlightened beings. Amidaji believes that only Buddhas have true merits that can be shared with others. In short, do your best in your everyday life to live according to the precepts, but rely only on Amida for the attainment of Buddhahood. Also, if you fail in perfectly observing the precepts, and I am certain that you will fail, do not ever feel that you are excluded from Amida's salvation. Do not transform your striving to observe precepts into an obstacle, blocking the non-discriminative compassion of Amida Buddha. This is why Bodhisattva Maitreya, with his palms together, said, "O Buddha, how appropriate your admonition is. People of the world are just as you have described. O Tathagata, you take pity on and care for us without discrimination, and seek to deliver us all from suffering. Having accepted the Buddha's repeated exhortations, I will be careful not to disobey them." You take pity on and care for us without discrimination shows that in the end, the main message of Shakyamuni's larger sutra is that we are all accepted by Amida just as we are, and our success or lack of any success in observing the precepts does not make us fall from Amida's embrace, if we fully entrust to him and say his name in faith. Being born in the pure land of Amida will finally help us reach total purity and freedom from samsaric realms. Only there we will dwell in effortless spontaneity and attain nirvana. Quote, "Anyone who sincerely desires birth in the land of peace and bliss is able to attain purity of wisdom and supremacy in virtue. The Buddha said to Bodhisattva Maitreya and to devas and humans, the virtue and wisdom of Shravakas and Bodhisattvas in the land of Amitayas are indescribable. That land is sublime, blissful, serene and pure." End quote. All disciples of Amida, or Shravakas, who are also enlightened Bodhisattvas, have infinite wisdom and virtues which are beyond understanding. And the Pure Land itself has the purity, serenity, and bliss of enlightenment. Unlike here in Samsara, where everything is conducive to more attachment and delusion, in the Pure Land everything is conducive to nirvana. Quote, "Why do you not diligently practice good, reflect on the naturalness of the way, and realize that it is above all discrimination and is boundlessly pervasive?" End quote. Strive your best to do good, but also realize that the way to the Pure Land does not discriminate between good and evil, as all who have faith in Amida are equally embraced and naturally led to enlightenment. Quote, "You should each make a great effort to attain it, strive to escape from samsara, and be born in the land of peace and provision. Then the causes of the 5 evil realms have been destroyed. They will naturally cease to be, and so you will progress unhindered in your pursuit of the way." End quote. The first sentence is similar to the following passage from section 47. Quote, "Even if a great fire were to fill the universe of 1,000 million worlds, you should pass through it to hear this sutra, to arouse joyful faith, to uphold and chant it, and to practice in accordance with its teachings." End quote. Both mean to take the matter of the afterlife very seriously and make the effort to listen deeply to Amida Dharma so that you can understand the content of the teaching with the rational mind and receive faith in your heart. Quote, "The Pure Land is easy to reach, but very few actually go there. It rejects no one, but naturally and unfailingly attracts beings. Why do you not abandon worldly matters and strive to enter the way? If you do, you will obtain an infinitely long life and one of limitless bliss." End quote. The Pure Land is easy to reach for those who have exclusive faith in Amida, exclusively say his name, and wish to be born in his Pure Land. But it is hard for those who cling partially or totally to their personal power, and especially impossible for those who are focused on worldly matters and have no aspiration for enlightenment. The infinite long life that is attained in the Pure Land refers to going beyond death and birth and rebirth, but also to the attainment of the three Buddha bodies or aspects. 1. Ultimate Dharmakaya beyond form, which is no beginning and no end, always existing but never recognized until the attainment of Buddhahood. 2. Sambhogakaya body in the Pure Land, with a beginning in the moment of enlightenment and without end, from which various 3. Nirmanakaya manifestations are sent in all corners of the samsaric universe. These Nirmanakaya manifestations will last as long as you wish. As Shakyamuni said, quote, "If you wish your life to be as long as a kalpa, 100 kalpas or 10 million kotis of kalpas, it will be just as you please. Seek your own liberation and then turn to saving others. Straightforwardly aspire to be born in the Pure Land and accumulate roots of virtue." End quote. Entrust yourself to Amida and help others to do the same. Reach the Pure Land of Amida, attain enlightenment there, and come back in various forms to help others. Aspire to be born in the Pure Land by entrusting to Amida and receive his infinite merits and virtues, or the roots of virtue. Quote, "However hard you may practice in this life, it can only be for a short while. In the life to come, you will be born in the land of Amidaji and enjoy endless bliss there. Being forever in accord with the way, you will no longer be subject to birth and death, and be free of the afflictions caused by greed, anger, and ignorance." End quote. In this unenlightened realm, itself the effect of our individual and collective karma, everything is conducive to more attachments and delusions. The practice is not constant and not powerful enough to lead one to liberation, while in the Pure Land everything is conducive to enlightenment. Here in samsara we can always retrogress, and our so-called spiritual realizations are subject to impermanence, but in the Pure Land we are forever free from death, rebirth, and all kinds of blind passions and delusions. Quote, "You should each diligently seek to realize your aspiration. Do not entertain any doubt or give up your endeavors, lest as a result of that fault you should be born into the 7-jewel palace in the border region of the Pure Land and be subject to various disadvantages for 500 years. End quote. Do not cling to your own power or your so-called spiritual realization, and instead rely completely on Amida's power so that you can bypass the borderland and be born directly in the center of the Pure Land, that is, the fulfilled land of the Pure Land, where you can immediately attain perfect enlightenment. Quote, Maitreya said to the Buddha, "Having received your considerate admonition, we will diligently practice the way and follow your teaching. We will not allow any doubts to arise." End quote. Maitreya thus positioned himself as a protector and transmitter of the way of faith in Amida to future generations. He appears many times in the Sutra and receives with joy the teaching presented here. Shakyamuni himself reveals that Maitreya is not an ordinary person, but an enlightened bodhisattva who for ages has worked for the salvation of all beings. Quote, Maitreya, you should know that you have for innumerable kalpas been perfecting the bodhisattva practices to save sentient beings. Incalculable indeed is the number of beings who under your guidance have attained the way and reached nirvana. From time immemorial, you and all the devas and humans in the 10 directions and the 4 groups of followers have been floundering in the 5 realms of samsara, undergoing indescribable troubles and afflictions. Until you were born in this life, you too underwent endless cycles of birth and death. Now you have encountered a Buddha, listened to his expositions of the Dharma, and been able to learn about Amidaji. What pleasure and joy this is for you and for me to share. I shared the joy with you. End quote. Maitreya too had a time when he was floundering in the 5 realms of samsara, undergoing indescribable troubles and afflictions, until he was born in this life, that is, until he attained enlightenment and became an enlightened bodhisattva or Buddha who manifests as a bodhisattva. He too was subject to endless cycles of birth and death. This is an extremely important passage which shows that the endless cycles of birth and death are something of the past for Maitreya. This also supports the idea that he is now free from samsara and will one day take the place of Shakyamuni in the role of teaching Amida Dharma to future generations. Shakyamuni actually transmits the sutra to Maitreya for protection and future preservation. Quote, now you have encountered a Buddha, listened to his expositions of the Dharma, and been able to learn about Amitayus. What pleasure and joy this is for you and me to share. I share the joy with you. What pleasure and joy this is for you and me to share. I share the joy with you. End quote. This means I choose you. You have encountered a Buddha for the transmission of this Dharma about Amida. What pleasure and joy this is for you and me to share. I share the joy with you. Maitreya asked all the questions in the sutra for our sake, not because he did not know the answers, and he always received with devotion what Shakyamuni taught, including the way he described the karmic situations of unenlightened beings. Quote, Bodhisattva Maitreya prostrated himself on the ground and said, your majestic glory, O Buddha, is awe-inspiring, and your exposition is most pleasing to me. Having heard your teaching, I feel deeply that people of the world are just as you have described. End quote. That is, without any true capacity to liberate themselves from samsara through their own efforts. Quote, your compassionate revelation of the Great Way has opened our eyes and ears, awakening us to liberation. Those who have heard your teachings are all filled with joy. Devas, humans, and lesser beings, including even those that crawl, have all been blessed by your compassionate guidance and have thereby attained deliverance from suffering and affliction. End quote. Shakyamuni's revelation of the way to the Pure Land in this sutra opened up the eyes of beings to their true limited capacities and the non-discriminative compassion of Amida Buddha. All devas or gods, humans, and any other being who accepts this teaching in faith enter the stage of non-retrogression for birth in the Pure Land and attainment of nirvana. Quote, the Buddha's admonition is indeed profound and appropriate, and his wisdom clearly surveys things in the 8 directions above and below, penetrating all in the past, present, and future. Our liberation in the present life is entirely due to the Buddha's perseverance and painstaking efforts in his former lives when he was seeking the way. His benevolence covers the whole world, and the extent of his merit is majestic and glorious. His light penetrates to the utmost ends of space and guides people to nirvana. He reveals the sutras, destroys wrong views, and subdues demons. Thus, his influence extends boundlessly in the 10 directions. The Buddha is the king of the Dharma. His virtue surpasses that of all the sages. He is the teacher of all devas and humans and enables them to enter the way according to their wishes. Having been able to meet you, O Buddha, and also to hear the name of Amitayus or Amida, we have all attained joy and illumination. End quote. In his role of teaching Amida Dharma, Shakyamuni's benevolence for us cannot be described in words and cannot be repaid, no matter what we do through our own powers. We came to hear this profound teaching because of his great efforts for many lifetimes and his apparition in human form as a Buddha, our liberation in the present life, which actually means our entering the stage of non-retrogression for the attainment of enlightenment in the Pure Land, is due to the compassionate work of Amida and Shakyamuni. His revelation of Amida Dharma is universal and spreads to all the worlds in the 10 directions. We are all illuminated by this teaching and made capable of attaining the freedom of nirvana. Quote, the Buddha said to Maitreya, what you say is true. Those who adore and revere a Buddha attain great merit. End quote. In this very sutra, Shakyamuni said, section 27, that those who have met Buddhas in their past lives and treated them with respect and devotion can easily accept his teaching about Amida. Also, to have faith, adore, and revere Amida will make us good vessels for his transference of infinite merits and virtues, which become the fuel for reaching the Pure Land. Quote, Buddhas very rarely appear in the world. Having become a Buddha in this life, I've taught the Dharma, expounded teachings of the way, cleared people's doubts, eradicated the causes of lust and desire, and blocked the source of all evils. Visiting various places in the 3 worlds, I encounter no obstructions. The wisdom disclosed in the scriptures provides for all ways of life. It keeps essential principles together and clearly reveals the truth. End quote. Shakyamuni expounded many Dharma gates and practices suited for all kinds of beings and for many situations that exist in life. But his most important teaching, which can be followed by anybody, no matter what their level of spiritual attainment, is Amida Dharma. Quote, I've explained the reality of the 5 realms, thereby freeing those who have not yet attained deliverance and distinguishing between the paths of samsara and nirvana." End quote. Unlike those false teachers of modern times who misguide people by denying life after death and rebirth in various states of samsaric existence, calling them metaphors and symbols, Shakyamuni clearly described them as real places for unenlightened beings, from which he urged us to escape through faith in Amida. He showed the karmic consequences of a life lived under delusion and blind passions, and the bliss and freedom of nirvana that we will attain in the Pure Land. There are 4 important footnotes in this section. The first important footnote refers to the sentence, "This is also why we do not link precepts with attaining Buddhahood. Everything unenlightened beings do in the 3 ways of action is poisoned by ignorance and egoism, so they cannot be called pure or good actions useful for attaining perfect nirvana. The 3 actions are by thought, action, and words." The second important footnote refers to enlightened bodhisattvas, which are explained by the author in section 2. That is, explanations of the enlightened bodhisattvas in the audience. The third important footnote states, "Maitreya can help others enter nirvana because he himself has attained it. Now he acts as a bodhisattva and will take the place of Shakyamuni as the next great Buddha of our era." The fourth and final footnote states, "The causes of our liberation from birth and death are planted in this life when we entrust to Amida Buddha."